Well, hello everyone. Happy Father's Day to everybody. And I have right here talking about this example right here of this greeting card right here. And I know like a lot of dads will probably say too that like a lot of times if it comes to an electronic greeting card, Father's Day card or something from their son or daughter, just like a little quick memo or something like that, anything that you would like to add, to that memo. And one of those memos is maybe going to be about, maybe one of your favorite event or maybe a favorite game or something like that. But most of the time, though, it sure seems that way that whenever it comes to most dads, though, especially, at the time, we want to know too that, what do you think, what does the president say whenever it comes to talking about, accomplishments, talking about the grade book and talk about, fun things that we like doing with our dads. And let's just say that if the son or daughter were to say something like, maybe something like, yeah, storytelling, and also if it comes to spending time in the kitchen and then maybe traveling or maybe vacation or maybe the things that they can remember doing with their dad. And so you have right here talking about right here of like Obama. And I'm like, you talk about for President Obama here. And but one thing that I people say like too is toward this right here says 2020 right here. So let's just say that if there's a child that's maybe going to say that a greeting card that you meant to give to your dad, from last year, maybe anything that you might find that anything that a kid that made in school that you meant to give to your dad, from last year or something like that, and then people might want to know too that your greeting cards, if it's maybe a box of chocolates or something like that, well, how do you usually handle that to where it's something that you meant to give to somebody from last year, and due to the whole pandemic and everything, and you're probably like 102 that you look around and you find things that you meant to give to somebody from about 6 months ago or a year ago or something like that. So it's like trying to catch up with anything that had to be postponed or rescheduled or delayed or anything like that. And so that's why it sure seems that way that you think about Father's Day is just another way of how you want to call us toward it. Yeah, well, when we think about dads, though, do we think about the typical power tools, like the hand tools, or maybe spending time in the garage or something like that, or special grills or maybe yard appliances or anything like that, garden appliances. But a lot of times it sure seems that way that when we think about dads, though, that most parents would say too, that number one though between who's the oldest and knowing that if you like a lot of dads would even say too that why would you think that most children would think as to what if you have a favorite child the group the family everybody say is to where well most parents would say that they like they try to think about their children, of course, as their angels. It's like as their so gift of God. You know how that's like is toward it that whenever you're going to have a son or a daughter, one of them that's going to be the oldest, and one of them who's going to be what you call is like that for. So it sure seems that way that most dads would be maybe asked that question toward it that do you did you like the oldest better or do you like the youngest better or anything like that, and if it's a son or a daughter. And so a lot of dads would probably say that well really that the important key, the factor to remember is that the things that you like doing with your dad and just knowing is toward it about how many times are we going to be thinking about that toward that shopping around for dad and thinking about something that you want to give to dad especially. But it sure seems that way. It's just toward exactly what do you think that the president would say whenever it comes to that you were thinking about gifts, special gifts, and greetings and anything that you want to tell your dad especially. And your dad would probably say is toward it, yeah, well, really, that the gift of appreciation, the gift of kindness, also, you take the time to go ahead and call your dad, or just maybe call and talk to somebody, and you want to know too is toward it, yeah, well, first of all, it's like if you were to actually put together, yeah, do something creative, especially. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that the doodads really think about creativity, talk about for young and intelligence or anything like that. Talk about for Father's Day right here, and you're probably thinking too that yeah, well, really that what do you think that the president would say whenever it comes to trying to tell somebody a story about something that you were able to achieve? And let's just say that, yeah, well, it's something that you were able to get dad's attention by. And let's just say that, yeah, well, if it was maybe a game that you were playing, online, or something that you can remember doing, those couple years ago, and it sure seems that way that for the most part, that like, yeah, if you were to be talking to your dad, though, that you're going to be talking about stuff and just kind of making a tease about stuff, and it's like things that maybe that you do not want to be remembered by, and like yeah, your old grade report, or the stuff, like, yeah, what was your favorite subjects a lot of times. And so yeah, if you're going to be talking to your dad or anybody who could maybe have a, like, yeah, if it's going to maybe be the in-laws, especially if it's going to be a father-in-law or a mother-in-law or somebody. And a lot of times it sure seems that way, that you kind of start the conversation by saying is toward a, yeah, I meant to give this to you last year. I meant to, yeah, I've actually been waiting to tell you this for nearly for 5 years, but every time I tried every time we tried talking about it, it seemed like that we were always busy on our schedules and everything. And so it sure seems that way, that most dads, the first of all, it's like, yeah, that what's one thing that we can maybe what's some good advice that we can give to our children whenever it comes to Father's Day? That it seems like that dads seem to be busy all the time with the that they're working on, and it sure seems that way toward it. Yeah, that anything that is related to about talking about dads, though, that you're probably thinking that, hey, that whenever it comes to getting busy and working on something, though, and a lot of times it sure seems that way, that yeah, what's one thing that we can maybe think about to tell our dads? And like I say, yeah, well, really, that the good advice is to say is toward it, yeah, that whenever you do talk to somebody, even over the phone, and it's like, yeah, well, normally that there will be an opportunity to where that yeah, by the time you actually connect, most of the time it sure seems that way, that whenever you do by the time you do connect to somebody and start talking about something, to somebody, and most of the time it sure seems that way, that why do you think that it really has to be explained on the greeting card? Like, really, that greeting card, of course, may be it may take a year for it to be received, and it may take a year for it to be delivered, right? Or maybe not even that long. But it seems like to me to where that if you can send a message, an electronic message to somebody, include like a greeting card in there, and half the time you want to know too that yeah, whenever you can, to take time from your busy schedule, okay, is that if whenever you can, take a minute, to listen to what the greeting card has to say, okay? That greeting card has to say about, yeah, try this out, try out this cooking recipe, or try out this new tool, or these new advanced features that are now available over there at the hardware store, or over there at the store, that store that we used to go shopping at together, or something like that. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that yeah, that what's what when we think about Father's Day, though, that we also maybe think about, yeah, the grandkids, and then we may also think about is that, if you have a friend of yours who like, yeah, who's the father of a son and daughter, or if you have a friend of yours that you talk to, and So a lot of times it sure seems that way. That when we think about those dads out there, that do most dads necessarily think about for who's the favorite child of the family, or if anything, that I say that no, try to think about that as to where that we are Americans, right? And knowing about that we are so talking about with our with the country, and like so a lot of times it sure seems that way, that in order to be able to celebrate Father's Day, it sure seems that way that celebrating Father's Day, though, that in order to be able to celebrate Father's Day, for like the special your tradition, though, and it sure seems that way that you're going to have your differences. Your father and son and father and daughter are going to have your differences, right? And from those differences, though, it sure seems that way that with those differences, that the father, that father, of course, they, you're going to have your differences so far as what do you do for I'm like, yeah, what do you do so far as your career goes, and so let's just say that somebody that could be working in fast food, somebody that could be also be working as an auto mechanic. That other person could be working in retail. That other person right there could be working at the cook shop or something like that. So it sure seems that way, that whenever you do talk to your dad a lot of times about stuff, and a lot of times it sure seems that way, that you're going to have your agreements and your disagreements about things. But it sure seems that way that, yeah, that, in order to be able to show love and companionship, and it sure seems that way that yeah, your dad, of course, is maybe going to encourage you to be just like him, and just take interest in what he likes. Like, yeah, the things that you like compared to what your dad likes. And a lot of times it sure seems that way, that we kind of find that. I'm like, I don't know if we really find that to be most difficult whenever it comes to our parents. If we're talking about the dads, though, that a lot of things that your dad likes, that maybe that the son or daughter doesn't like, or if they do like, and so between our likes and our dislikes and everything, and so that's why it sure seems that way, to where that when we think about Father's Day, though, that do we necessarily think about as to where yeah, these special traditions and events and all that, and you're probably the likely one, though, too, that the first thing that's going to come to your mind whenever you think about Father's Day, though, you want to think about homework as an example of a good way of how to celebrate time with your father. And whenever you think about homework, though, that you're going to maybe think about the things that you do like and the things that you don't like, period. So you're talking about subjects, and talk about the things that you do like and the things that you don't like at all. And let's just say if the dad that really wants to maybe say maybe just talk for a minute about how come that you didn't like that, or hey, how come you didn't like this, and so it sure seems that way, that when we talk about Father's Day, especially Father's Day traditions, that it sure seems that way, that you're going to have your talks and discussions about certain things, but still, though, that what's one thing, what's the key factor to remember is knowing about whenever you do talk to your dad on Father's Day, though, it sure seems that way, that yeah, you took the time and the opportunity to be able to talk and say, hey, how's it going? Well, thanks, thanks for Mike, all the precious memories, or the thoughts, and anything that you wanted to talk to your dad, talk to the dads, and that. Well, but one key to the fact to remember is that you're just knowing about really, what have you learned from me, and what have you learned from your dad. So it sure seems that way, that anything impressive that you want to talk to your dad about, especially. And so it sure seems that way, that most children would probably say, tell their dads, as to where anything that you may have learned from your son and daughter, anything that you may have learned from them, from the whole quarter of the year, and if we're talking about maybe 6 months, from earlier, and you'll probably want to know too, that a lot of children would probably ask their parents that question, ask the dad that, and even ask the mom that, or even ask the aunt or the uncle that. That what have you learned from me, that maybe that you were not able to learn from anybody else. And I'm sure that parents would probably maybe think of at least one thing. And, yeah, maybe bedtime stories and also intelligent, talent and intelligent, traditional looking or something like that. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that most dads might say is toward a we have our differences, son. We have our differences, daughter, and son and daughter, and we have our differences. But still, that out of those differences, it sure seems that way. That what's one thing that we do have in common, though, is that really that just to kind of bring the group together and just knowing that the things that we were working on, and yeah, bring talking about you know truth and honesty, and also respect, and also just knowing about the fact about the things that you do as a father and the things that you do as a son. No, and people might want to know too this to where if it's really all about the fact about if the son or daughter is maybe going to ask the father that question to where did you like them better than did you like me, or I'm like, yeah, so it sure seems that way that the son or the daughter is going to start the conversation by stating to her that, yeah, that person had health problems, or that person wasn't perfect just because that, yeah, they had problems. They struggled a lot in school. They struggled a lot on the job, and then they struggled a lot with getting a lot of things done. And a lot of times, it sure seems that way that whenever we talk about accomplishments and goals, though, that fathers can probably tell their children, though, that not everybody is perfect, but still, the key factor to remember is to know is toward it, really that you look at your accomplishments as pride. You think about the things that were not there before. What has improved over time. And the way I think about it, though, is toward it when we think about Father's Day, though, that, yeah, we think about that is toward bright and intelligence, right? That even though if this greeting card was supposed to be received since last year, but it's like, whenever we think about fathers, though, that, yeah, most of the time, that, a lot of dads out there would say is that you go ahead and take the opportunity to talk to your dad about stuff, and let's just say that if it's about how to play a game or how to use these tools, and how to do this, and like, yeah, showing teaching teaching them the basics. I mean, yeah, how to drive especially. I mean, if it's how to drive, and maybe how to use how to work in the garden, or somewhere like that, and something like that. So it's basically yeah, most of the time it sure seems that way that dads would say too that you learned something from your dad, but how often or really is it going to be about is to where that the daughter or the son is able to teach the dad something. And a lot of times it's like, well, really, if you can even think of one thing, and more likely people might even say too that really, what have you really learned from me, dad? And like, but still that but on the other hand, that talk about for Father's Day right here, that whenever we think about Father's Day, though, that we also think about is the tour that we're not really. I'm like, yeah, for how well somebody does in school, but then also the activities that you can remember doing with your dad, and and I'm sure that there's more than one thing for sure. Like whenever you go out shopping, and also whenever you're working around the house, and you're gonna maybe you're gonna have your memories about your dad, and so a lot of times it sure seems that way. That whenever we think about our dads, though, that are we necessarily going to be thinking about who was the favorite family member, or who was who do you think that was the smartest, and besides for who was the oldest, and so I don't really think, like a lot of dads would probably say too, that you try to think about that is toward it. They are the brother. They are. Yeah, they are the family member, and so it sure seems that way. That bright and intelligent, though. That think about something I'm like, yeah, think about something about, for each family member that each person has a skill and has a talent, and that's why it sure seems that way that most dads would say is to where that about every weekend around Father's Day weekend, though, that you want to think about that is to where that you want to go ahead and celebrate Father's Day as another way of how to remember, your dad, and of course the things that you did with your dad. And so one of those, of course, it would maybe be about, besides before the election days, like, about American history, whenever it comes to social studies, that the things that you remember doing with your dad, going to the museums, and most of the time it seems like, yeah, a lot of dads would probably say most of the time it's the museums. You take your kids to the museums, to the malls, the shopping malls, and to the museums, and you're able to walk through those museums and learn a lot of things at those museums, and so that's why it sure seems that way that when we think about your Father's Day right here on a greeting card, that it sure seems that way that the first thing that you might see right here, talk about for 2020 right here, and you're likely thinking that, hey, that you meant to give this greeting card to your to Paul, to Grandpa, you meant to give this greeting card to that somebody special, a year ago, but then you were not able to give it to them. And so just to kind of make the long story short, like anybody say too, that, hey, that's okay. I'm like, even though if it says, I'm like, yeah, everything may seem to be incorrect on that greeting card, but at the same time, that, yeah, it's, talk about typical fathers. Fathers would probably say too that, other than the better late than never, but still, that, what's the key factor to remember is mainly just knowing about it, as toward it, yeah, if it's the thought that counts, or a lot of dads will probably say too that you take the time and the opportunity toward it, yeah, you try to piece together, so I'm like, yeah, kind of like a game board, but still, you take the opportunity to where you can send out the invitation and send out the letter, and then, yeah, I'm sure that most dads would say too that they try to follow up and understand about what you were trying to do during a time, and it may not be all explained all very clearly, but during a time, it's like, yeah, it's all about us is toward a happy Father's Day. It's a time, and to remember, it's about the things that you enjoy doing with your dad. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and talk about for Happy Father's Day.